Have you ever wondered what kind of empire could rise from the ashes of one of the greatest civilizations the world had ever seen, only to vanish again in less than a century? And what if I told you that within those fleeting decades, it built wonders so breathtaking that even the ancient Greeks doubted they were real? This is the story of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, a civilization reborn from ruins, ruled by kings who dreamed in bricks and stars, and who carved their names into both the heavens and the earth. From the towering hanging gardens, said to be one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, to the mysterious astronomers who tracked planets and foretold destinies, Babylon wasn't just a city. It was the beating heart of a golden twilight before the world changed forever. But how did this empire rise so suddenly, blaze so brightly, and then fade into the dust of history? What secret decisions and hidden betrayals sealed its fate? Stay with me as we journey through time to uncover the splendor, the ambition, and the final twilight of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. The rise from the ashes, Babylon reborn. Have you ever wondered how a fallen city, left in dust and despair, could rise again to challenge empires, command kings, and capture the imagination of the world for thousands of years? Babylon was supposed to be finished. Its ziggurats lay in ruins, its gods forgotten, its people scattered under the iron rule of the Assyrians. The once great jewel of Mesopotamia had become a ghost city, its name whispered in sorrow. But beneath that silence, a pulse still beat. It started not with a god, nor with a dynasty, but with a man, Nabopolassar. No ancient inscription sings of his youth. Some say he was a general. Others, a man of low birth who saw too much cruelty and too little mercy. But in his heart burned something the Assyrians could never crush, an unyielding belief that Babylon could live again. Under the shadow of Assyrian might, Nabopolassar began to weave his plan. He gathered loyal men from the old Babylonian lands, united discontented tribes, and whispered of rebellion in a time when such whispers could cost a life. In 626 BCE, the impossible happened. Babylon revolted. Not with the roar of armies, but with the quiet precision of a people who had waited too long. The Assyrian governor fled. Temples once defiled were reopened. Priests sang again to Marduk, the city's ancient god. The flame of Babylon's spirit was rekindled, and Nabopolassar declared himself king. Yet as every rebel in history learns, freedom is only the beginning of a harder war. To the north, the Assyrian Empire still loomed, a war machine that had conquered the world through terror. Their armies, hardened and cruel, burned cities to ash and carried prisoners on hooks through the streets. They would not forgive Babylon's defiance. But Nabopolassar was not alone. In the mountains beyond the Tigris, the Medes, fierce horsemen from what is now Iran, had their own reason to hate Assyria. And so, an unlikely alliance was born. Babylon's cunning and wealth joined with the Medes' ferocity and numbers. Together, they prepared to strike the monster that had dominated the Near East for centuries. The war that followed was nothing short of biblical. The siege of Nineveh, the Assyrian capital, was a vision of apocalypse. Thunder rolled above as Babylonian siege engines battered walls said to be 100 feet high. The Medes, relentless and wild, tore through the outer defenses. For 3 long months, the skies above Nineveh were black with smoke and fire. Then, nature itself turned against the Assyrians. The Tigris River, swollen with rain, burst through its banks and collapsed part of the city's walls. Ancient texts tell us that the river opened its mouth to swallow Nineveh whole. By 612 BCE, the empire that had once ruled with iron and flame was gone. The Assyrian kings were dead, their palaces looted, their statues broken. From the ruins of Nineveh, Babylon's star rose higher than ever before. Nabopolassar, weary but victorious, returned to his capital. He had done what no man before him dared dream. He had avenged Babylon. But he also knew his time was fading. So he passed his crown, and his unfulfilled ambition, to his son, Nebuchadnezzar II. If Nabopolassar was the flame, Nebuchadnezzar was the inferno. From the moment he took the throne in 605 BCE, he moved with the confidence of destiny. He was a warrior, a builder, and a visionary in equal measure. His early campaigns were swift and brutal. He crushed the Egyptians at Carchemish, seized Syria, and marched on Jerusalem. Kingdoms that had mocked Babylon now sent tribute and hostages in gold, ivory, and slaves. But Nebuchadnezzar's true conquest was not on the battlefield. It was in stone, brick, and imagination. Babylon became his canvas. Picture it, colossal walls stretching for miles, high enough to make invaders tremble. Streets lined with polished bricks the color of lapis lazuli, reflecting the sun like a river of blue fire. And at its heart, the magnificent Ishtar Gate, adorned with lions, bulls, and dragons, a gateway to heaven itself. When travelers entered Babylon, they felt as though they had stepped into another world. And above it all rose the Etemenanki Ziggurat, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. Some believe this was the real Tower of Babel, a structure so tall it seemed to touch the stars. Nebuchadnezzar dedicated it to Marduk, but in truth it was also a monument to himself, a challenge to time and mortality. Yet for all his splendor, Nebuchadnezzar was haunted. Power breeds both awe and paranoia. He surrounded himself with priests, astronomers, and dream interpreters, men who charted the stars and read omens in the movement of planets. Babylonian astronomers were the finest the world had ever known. They could predict eclipses, trace Jupiter's path, and calculate the years by celestial rhythm. Nebuchadnezzar believed the heavens themselves spoke to him, guiding or warning his reign. And then there was the legend of the Hanging Gardens. Some say Nebuchadnezzar built them for his queen, Amytis of Media, who missed the green mountains of her homeland. Others say they never existed at all. But imagine the sight. Terraced gardens rising like a mountain of life amid the desert, vines cascading from stone arches, water flowing through hidden channels. A paradise in the heart of a burning land. Whether myth or truth, the gardens symbolized Babylon itself, a miracle defying nature. But beneath the beauty, cracks began to form. The empire stretched wide, the people diverse, and the weight of maintaining glory was immense. Nebuchadnezzar grew more isolated, consumed by visions and dreams. Ancient accounts describe him as a man who one day looked upon his city and said, "Is this not the great Babylon that I have built by my might and for the honor of my majesty?" It was pride, pure and naked, and pride, in every age, is the prelude to a fall. Even as Babylon glittered like a star against the night, shadows gathered at its edges. In distant lands, new powers were rising. The Medes, once allies, now whispered of independence. And beyond them, a young and ambitious kingdom called Persia began to stir under the leadership of a prince named Cyrus. Babylon, reborn from ruin, now stood at the height of its glory. Its towers reached the heavens, its rivers carried wealth beyond measure, and its king ruled with divine authority. Yet as the winds shifted across the desert, the same stars Nebuchadnezzar studied began to tell a different story. The story of how the brightest light would soon face its twilight, and that is where our next chapter begins. The Empire of Dreams, the Golden Age of Babylon. Have you ever stood in a city so magnificent that it feels alive, its streets humming with voices from every corner of the known world, its air heavy with the scent of incense and ambition? That was Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar II, a city so dazzling that even ancient travelers spoke of it as the Gate of the Gods. But behind that beauty, behind the shining blue gates and endless walls, something deeper stirred, a tension between heaven and earth, pride and prophecy, dream and destiny. The sun rises over the Euphrates. Golden light spills over the massive walls, glinting off copper roofs and temple domes. Merchants from Egypt, Phoenicia, and Persia crowd the main boulevard, their caravans groaning with spices, lapis, ivory, and silks. Priests chant hymns to Marduk from the towering ziggurat, their voices echoing like thunder. And in the heart of it all, the king himself, Nebuchadnezzar, steps out onto his terrace, looking down at the empire he has built from dust and blood. Babylon is no longer a city. It is the center of the universe. Nebuchadnezzar is restless. He has conquered all he can see. He has built all that a mortal can dream. Yet when night falls, he cannot sleep. For in his dreams, something calls to him, something vast, mysterious, and terrifying. The priests say it is the voice of the gods. The astronomers whisper that the stars are shifting, the patterns changing, as though heaven itself warns him. But the king laughs at omens. He believes in what he can touch, stone, gold, and glory. One night the dream returns. He sees a colossal statue made of shining metals, a head of gold, a chest of silver, a belly of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of clay. Then, a great stone falls from the heavens and shatters it to dust. Nebuchadnezzar wakes trembling, drenched in sweat. He calls his magi, astrologers, and soothsayers, demanding that they not only interpret the dream, but first tell him what he dreamed. They cannot, and in fury he orders their deaths. But then a prisoner is brought before him, a young Hebrew named Daniel, taken from Jerusalem years before during the Babylonian conquest. Daniel listens, calm and fearless, and tells the king his secret dream word for word. Then he says, "You, O king, are the head of gold, but after you, another kingdom shall arise, then another and another, until all are crushed by one not made by human hands." Nebuchadnezzar stares in silence. The mightiest man alive is being told that even he too will fade. Yet he bows before Daniel and proclaims, "Truly, your God is the God of gods." But that humility lasts only a moment, because prophecy has a cruel habit of planting fear, and fear, in the hearts of kings, breeds obsession. In the years that follow, Nebuchadnezzar's grandeur grows alongside his unease. He rebuilds Babylon 3 times over. He orders canals to divert the Euphrates, constructs massive walls 40 meters high and thick enough for chariots to race upon. He pours fortune after fortune into temples, and somewhere in that frenzy, legend says he creates his most famous masterpiece, the Hanging Gardens. Imagine it, a mountain of terraces rising high above the desert floor, covered in exotic trees and flowers from faraway lands. Streams of water cascade down from hidden aqueducts powered by ingenious pumps. At dawn, mist hovers around its crown, and birds nest in its hanging branches. To those who saw it, it was paradise itself, built, as the story goes, for Queen Amytis, who longed for the green hills of her homeland. For her, Nebuchadnezzar defied nature itself, bringing the mountains to the plains. Whether the gardens truly existed or not remains a mystery even today. Some say they were destroyed before the Greek historians could see them. Others believe they stood not in Babylon but in Nineveh. But within the story lies a truth. Nebuchadnezzar was a man obsessed with creation, with bending reality to his will. He wanted to make Babylon eternal, yet no empire lasts forever, and no man, however great, can escape the weight of his own mind. As years passed, something began to fracture within Nebuchadnezzar. Ancient tablets speak of strange proclamations, of a king who vanished for months, who wandered the fields like a wild beast, eating grass, his mind broken by the gods. Was it madness? Was it guilt? Or perhaps the haunting realization that even Babylon's glory could not silence the prophecy that once echoed in his dreams? When Nebuchadnezzar finally returned to his throne, he was no longer the same man. He had seen the fragility of his empire, the dust beneath the gold. In one of his later inscriptions, he writes not of conquest, but of gratitude. "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and honor the King of Heaven, for all his works are truth." It was a moment of surrender, from the mightiest ruler on earth to the unseen forces that governed fate. Under his rule, Babylon reached its zenith. Astronomers charted the stars with mathematical precision. Scribes recorded eclipses and planetary cycles. Philosophers studied the motion of time itself. Babylon became not only a city of kings, but of thinkers, scientists, and dreamers. The Babylonians knew the secrets of the sky long before the Greeks or Romans. They were the first to map the zodiac, the first to understand that the planets followed paths across the heavens. Their discoveries would echo through millennia, shaping science itself. But even as knowledge flourished, power shifted in the shadows. Nebuchadnezzar's death in 562 BCE marked the beginning of Babylon's slow unraveling. His heirs lacked his fire, his discipline, his vision. Within a generation, the court was filled with intrigue, greed, and betrayal. One king was assassinated by his own officials. Another reigned only weeks before vanishing into history. Babylon's brilliance had become a mirror, reflecting not strength but the fragility of human ambition. And while Babylon feasted far beyond its walls, a new power watched and waited. Across the Zagros Mountains, a rising star named Cyrus was uniting the tribes of Persia with words that stirred hearts more than swords. He spoke of freedom, justice, and destiny, and his name was beginning to echo in every market and caravan trail across the east. Back in Babylon, the priests still read omens in the stars, and what they saw began to trouble them. The constellation of the lion, Babylon's sacred symbol, was waning, while the constellation of the ram, the sign of Persia, rose brighter each night. To some it was superstition. To others it was prophecy fulfilling itself. The empire that began in fire now shimmered under the weight of gold. But as the river of history flowed on, one truth began to surface. Babylon's greatest danger was no longer outside its walls, it was within them. And soon, in the next chapter, we will watch as the empire of dreams begins to crack, and the twilight of Babylon approaches. The twilight of kings, pride, prophecy, and betrayal. What if the greatest threat to an empire isn't invasion, but the quiet rot that begins within its golden walls? What if the downfall of Babylon, the mightiest city ever built, was not written by enemies with swords, but by kings who no longer understood the gods they worshipped or the people they ruled? The year is 562 BCE. Nebuchadnezzar II, the builder of empires and dreamer of wonders, is dead. The once unshakable throne of Babylon now feels colder, emptier, and infinitely fragile. His son Amel-Marduk steps forward, a man raised in the shadow of greatness. But Babylon, in its grandeur, has become a serpent pit of ambition. Every courtier dreams of power, every priest fears loss of favor, and every general measures the crown as though it might soon fit their head. Amel-Marduk begins his rule with hesitation. He tries to reform laws, to show mercy to prisoners his father condemned. But in Babylon, mercy is weakness. The nobles whisper that he is unfit. The priests murmur that Marduk has withdrawn his blessing, and within 2 short years, Amel-Marduk is murdered by his brother-in-law, Nabopolassar. The coup is swift, bloody, and efficient. Nabopolassar is no visionary. He is a businessman, a man who understands wealth more than war. Under him, Babylon continues to trade, to build, to dazzle. But the flame that once made it the wonder of the world now flickers low. Outside the palace, the Euphrates still shines, the walls still tower, but inside, the spirit that had animated Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon has turned to ritual and rot. The astronomers still chart the heavens, but their prophecies are no longer heeded, their warnings dismissed as superstition. The cracks in the empire begin to widen when Nabopolassar dies, leaving behind a child, Marduk, barely old enough to understand the crown he wears. Babylon's generals and nobles see their chance. Within weeks, the boy king is overthrown. They drag him from the throne, and his life ends as quickly as his reign began. In the ancient chronicles, his name barely takes up a single line, and then comes Nabonidus. No king in Babylon's history would be more misunderstood, more controversial, or more fateful. Nabonidus is not of the royal line. He is a scholar, a dreamer, a man obsessed with the past. While others fight for gold, Nabonidus searches for God. He claims to receive visions from Sin, the moon god, a deity far older than Marduk, Babylon's chief god. And that changes everything. In a city where religion defines every breath, Nabonidus dares to challenge the priesthood. He builds new temples to Sin, moves statues of gods from other cities into Babylon, and, worst of all, neglects the annual New Year festival dedicated to Marduk. It's a ceremony as sacred to Babylonians as life itself, when the king must humble himself before the statue of Marduk and declare, "I have not sinned against your city." Without it, the priests say, the cosmic order itself is broken. The people begin to murmur that their king has gone mad. The priests of Marduk, the same order that crowned Nebuchadnezzar, turn against Nabonidus. And then, in a decision that would change history forever, Nabonidus abandons Babylon. He leaves his son Belshazzar to rule in his stead, while he retreats deep into the Arabian desert to build a new temple city, Tema. There, under the moonlit sky, he worships Sin and studies ancient tablets, convinced that he alone understands the divine truth. Back in Babylon, Belshazzar wears the crown but not the authority. The empire is adrift, its leadership divided, its gods offended. Outside the walls, the world shifts again. Persia, once a minor kingdom, now unites under a single banner, Cyrus the Great. Unlike the kings of old, Cyrus conquers not just with armies, but with ideas. Where Babylon rules through fear, Cyrus wins through loyalty. He speaks of liberation, of respecting local gods, of freeing the oppressed. And when he marches west, entire nations open their gates to him without a fight. By 540 BCE, Cyrus has crushed the Medes, subdued Lydia, and stands at the doorstep of Mesopotamia. The great walls of Babylon, 40 feet thick and soaring into the heavens, seem unassailable. Inside, Belshazzar mocks the approaching Persians. The river protects them, the walls defend them, and the gods, he believes, will never allow Babylon to fall. But the stars tell a different story. The scribes of the temple note strange omens. The moon darkened unexpectedly. Mars burns red over the western horizon. The constellation of the Lion, Babylon's guardian, dims. Even the priests who once ridiculed prophecy now whisper that Marduk is angry. As Cyrus advances, Nabonidus finally returns from the desert, but it's too late. His own generals no longer trust him. The Persian army, led by the cunning general Gobryas, encircles the empire's outer cities. One by one, Babylon's strongholds surrender without a fight. Yet the city itself stands proud, its gates closed, its people celebrating festivals as if the Persians were an illusion. And then, on a night that will echo through legend, everything changes. Inside the royal palace, Belshazzar hosts a grand feast. Wine flows like rivers. Golden cups stolen from the Temple of Jerusalem are filled in defiance of the foreign god of the Hebrews. The nobles laugh, the music swells, and torches flicker against the marble walls. But amid the revelry, a silence falls. On the plastered wall, a hand appears, a hand without a body, its fingers glowing with fire. It writes 3 words in a language none can read. The guests scream. The king stumbles back, his face pale as ash. He summons his magicians, his astrologers, his priests, but none can decipher the writing. Then, once again, a Hebrew is brought forth. Daniel, now an old man, long forgotten, but not gone. He looks upon the writing and speaks the words that would seal Babylon's fate. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. He turns to Belshazzar and says, God has numbered your kingdom and brought it to an end. You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Your kingdom will be divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. The feast goes on in eerie silence. Outside the walls, under a moonless sky, the Persians move. They divert the Euphrates River into nearby canals, lowering its water until their soldiers can wade beneath Babylon's mighty gates. The guards, drunk from celebration, never notice. By dawn, the city that once ruled the world is theirs. Belshazzar lies dead. Nabonidus is captured, and the gates of Babylon open not through battle, but through hubris. Cyrus the Great enters the city without bloodshed. He spares the temples, restores the idols to their shrines, and proclaims himself chosen by Marduk to bring peace. To the Babylonians, it is as if destiny itself has spoken. The age of Babylon is over. Yet as the sun rises over its golden roofs one last time, a question lingers in the air. Was this the end of Babylon, or merely the beginning of something far greater that would carry its knowledge, its dreams, and its stars into the ages to come? In the next chapter, we follow what remains after the fall, the scholars, the astronomers, and the echoes of Babylon's wisdom that would shape the very foundation of human civilization. The shadow of empires, the fall and the echo. Have you ever wondered what it feels like when a world ends, not in a single instant, but in a slow, echoing silence that stretches across centuries? Babylon did not burn when it fell. Its people woke up the next morning to the same sunrise, the same river, the same streets. And yet, everything had changed. When Cyrus the Great entered Babylon in 539 BCE, he came not as a destroyer, but as a liberator. The Persians were different from the empires that had come before. They understood something subtle, something powerful, that conquest through mercy lasts longer than conquest through fear. Cyrus walked through the Ishtar Gate, past the lions and dragons that once symbolized Babylon's dominion, and declared himself chosen by Marduk, the Babylonian god himself, to restore peace. It was a masterstroke of politics and psychology. The priests who had despised Nabonidus for abandoning their rituals now hailed Cyrus as their savior. In the Cyrus Cylinder, often called the first declaration of human rights, He claimed that he had freed the people from tyranny and restored their gods to their sanctuaries. To the Babylonians, weary from internal chaos, it must have sounded like divine deliverance. Cyrus allowed the exiled peoples, Jews, Syrians, and others, to return to their homelands, including those taken by Nebuchadnezzar decades before. He promised stability and prosperity. For a time, Babylon thrived once again, but it was no longer the heart. It was now a jewel in another empire's crown. Yet Babylon refused to vanish. Even as Persia absorbed it, the city retained its aura of sacredness. Scholars still came to its libraries, priests still read the stars from its rooftops, and traders still called it the Gate of the Gods. But beneath the grandeur lay a quiet truth. The pulse that once beat with defiant independence now beat in the name of foreign kings. Decades passed. Empires shifted. When Cyrus's descendants faltered, another storm rose from the west, the army of Alexander the Great. In 331 BCE, after the Battle of Gaugamela, Alexander marched into Babylon. And once again, the gates opened not in defiance, but in welcome. The priests greeted him with garlands. The people bowed, not from fear, but from habit. Alexander saw in Babylon not a city of ruins, but a treasure, a bridge between east and west, between gods and men. He ordered the restoration of the great ziggurat, the Etemenanki, and spoke of making Babylon the capital of his world empire. Imagine it, a Macedonian conqueror dreaming of ruling from the same city that Nebuchadnezzar once called home. The streets filled again with architects, philosophers, and astrologers. For a fleeting moment, it seemed Babylon might live again, reborn under a new star. But fate is cruel to dreamers. In 323 BCE, Alexander fell ill in Babylon. Fever gripped him, and for days he lay on his bed, unable to speak, staring at the ceiling painted with constellations. The same stars that had once guided Babylon's astronomers now watched as the greatest conqueror since Nebuchadnezzar took his final breath. He died there, young, invincible in legend, but mortal in truth, within the walls of the city he had hoped to make eternal. After his death, chaos returned. His generals tore the world apart in their struggle for power. Babylon was caught in the crossfire, sieged, plundered, abandoned, rebuilt. The once mighty temples crumbled. The canals silted over. The hanging gardens, if they had ever truly existed, vanished beneath the sands. By the 1st century BCE, Greek travelers described the city as a husk, its ruins inhabited by foxes and serpents. The empire that had once touched the heavens now lay buried beneath its own dust. And yet, Babylon's story did not end in its ruins. Because the spirit of Babylon, the knowledge, the science, the wisdom, was too vast to die. Its astronomers' records, inscribed on clay tablets, would shape the birth of modern astronomy. The division of the circle into 360 degrees, the tracking of eclipses, the naming of constellations, all of it flowed from Babylon's scholars. Their mathematics, based on the sexagesimal system, still lives in every minute and second we count today. The world forgot the kings, but it remembered their numbers. It forgot the palaces, but it remembered the stars. Centuries later, the Bible would speak of Babylon not as a city, but as a symbol of arrogance, beauty, and divine judgment. Babylon the Great, it called her, the mother of kingdoms. For the writers of Scripture, Babylon was both a memory and a warning that every empire that exalts itself will fall. And yet, isn't that what makes Babylon timeless? It was never just a place, it was an idea, a vision of human greatness pushed to its limits, the power to build wonders that reached for the heavens, and the hubris that pulled them back down to earth. Today, if you walk the plains of Iraq near Hilla, you can still see fragments of Babylon's walls, baked mud bricks stamped with Nebuchadnezzar's name. The river still winds lazily nearby. The wind still carries whispers through the ruins, and when night falls, the same stars still shimmer above the desert sky. The same constellations that once guided Babylonian priests thousands of years ago. So perhaps Babylon never truly died. Perhaps it simply changed form, its spirit scattered into every civilization that came after. Every city that reaches for the sky, every scientist who looks to the heavens, every empire that believes it can last forever, carries a fragment of Babylon within it. But there remains one final question, one last whisper in the dust. Was Babylon's fall the curse of pride or the price of vision? Because what if every empire, no matter how mighty, is destined to walk the same path, from brilliance to blindness, from glory to ghost? In the next and final chapter, we will uncover how Babylon's legacy, its gods, its stars, its dreams, did not die, but transformed the world that followed. The fall of Babylon, it turns out, was not an ending, but a beginning. The eternal city, legacy of the stars and the gods. What if the greatest power of Babylon was never its walls, nor its kings, nor its treasures, but its memory? What if the true empire it built was invisible, stretching not across land, but across time itself? Because long after the lions of the Ishtar Gate faded, long after the Hanging Gardens crumbled into myth, Babylon continued to shape the world's mind. It began quietly. The Persians ruled, the Greeks conquered, the Romans rose, but through all of it, Babylon's scholars kept teaching. They passed on their knowledge like sacred fire. When Alexander's generals carved up his empire, they carried Babylonian scrolls and tablets westward, into libraries and academies. The Greeks marveled at what they found. They called the Babylonians Chaldeans, wise men of the stars. To the Greeks, they were not enemies of the past, but masters of the heavens. From the cracked clay of their tablets came the foundations of astronomy. They taught that the moon's movements could be measured, that eclipses followed patterns, that time itself had rhythm. Their numbers, 60 seconds, 60 minutes, 360 degrees, became the language by which humanity measures both the heavens and the heartbeat. Even today, when we look at a clock or trace a circle, we are whispering Babylon's language. And their gods, those mighty spirits of sky and storm, love and war, did not vanish either. They simply changed names. Ishtar became Aphrodite, then Venus. Marduk's echoes can be felt in the Zeus of Olympus, and even in the archangels of later faiths. The serpent, the flood, the tower that touches heaven, all found new life in myths that would define civilizations. Babylon, unknowingly, had written the first chapters of the world's shared imagination. But the legacy that perhaps mattered most came from a people who once walked through its gates in chains, the exiles from Judah. When Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem and carried its people to Babylon, he could not have imagined that their faith would endure. Yet in the shadow of Babylon's ziggurats, their prophets wrote, their poets sang, and their God grew larger than any empire. They dreamed of freedom, and when Cyrus allowed them to return, their story became scripture. In their writings, Babylon became both memory and metaphor, the city of temptation, of human pride, of fallen glory. By the rivers of Babylon, one psalm mourned, we sat down and wept. And thus, the name of Babylon lived on, not as a ruin, but as a symbol. In the Christian book of Revelation, centuries later, Babylon the Great would stand for every empire that forgets its soul in pursuit of power. The prophecy would echo, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. It was no longer a city, it was an idea. A mirror held up to every civilization that dared to build towers too close to heaven. Yet even that judgment could not erase the awe. For every fall, Babylon offered a lesson. For every ruin, a revelation. Empires learned from it, how to govern, how to build, how to watch the skies. The Roman calendar owes its logic to Babylonian observation. Medieval scholars translated their star charts. The Renaissance rediscovered their mathematics. Even modern space agencies, mapping constellations, naming planets, studying cosmic cycles, stand on Babylon's shoulders. Picture it now, a night sky glittering above the ruins near Hilla, Iraq. The wind sighs through broken bricks stamped with Nebuchadnezzar's name, and above them burns the same belt of Orion that the Babylonian astronomers once recorded. They charted those same lights, believing they were messages from the gods. We, in our telescopes, see burning suns millions of miles away. Different eyes, same wonder. Perhaps that is Babylon's truest immortality. The desire to understand the cosmos, to find meaning in the stars, to build, to question, to create, is as old as the first bricks of that city. Babylon was not just a kingdom of kings. It was humanity's first mirror. In its rise, we see ambition. In its fall, humility. In its memory, the endless human urge to reach beyond ourselves. So when we speak of Babylon, we are not speaking only of ruins in the desert. We are speaking of every civilization that dares to dream, of every builder who reaches for perfection, of every thinker who studies the night sky and wonders what lies beyond. The hanging gardens may be gone, the temples silent, the rivers diverted, but the spirit that once animated them still flows through us. And maybe that's the final twist in Babylon's story. It never truly fell. It simply became the world. Because as long as humanity dreams, as long as we build, as long as we look upward and whisper questions to the stars, we are all, in some small way, children of Babylon. Fade out as the camera pulls high above the desert, the ruins glimmering under the constellations first named by Babylonian priests, their shapes forming the same patterns that have watched over humankind since the dawn of history. The heavens that remember.